Economist here. Thank you for hitting that thumbs up button when you come into the live stream. The algorithm will pick up the video, spread it around for more people to join in. And the conversation is always so much better when we have more people joining in on the live stream. Today, we're going to be talking about the mystery of the science behind economics. This is something that I find very interesting to talk to other people about when it comes to really what is the economy, because the economy is really you and me and the way that we behave within the interactions that it comes to businesses and investments and savings and all the things that we do to for our daily lives. We individually are the economy, the individual choices you make. And that's what I find so interesting when I find like people who say that economists are mystics and crackpots, right? And that's what I left down in the description was an article, and I believe it was in Santa Barbara, talking about the housing market there, and they had an economist who was really breaking it down pretty simply, saying that if you have minimum wage, then you're going to have unemployment. If there was no minimum wage, everybody would be working. And I totally agree with it. It's something that I have said on this channel many times. And he has these ideas that are very free market thinking, and they literally call him a crackpot, right? Like it's just like he doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense when you think about the economy from an individual point of view. Like your point of view is going to be very different from anybody else's point of view. And because of that, each and every single one of us together make the economy up, right? But there is no economy. Like there is no individual economy to deal with when it comes to like what politics can do, what the Fed can do, what anything else, anybody can do out there, right? It's the way that we interact with it. Now, you have to break it down simply, right? That's why I like taking it back to this essay, right? Cantillon's essay on economic theory. All right. I'm going to hold it up there so you all can see it, read it, all right? This is one of the oldest essays on economics when it came to like breaking down how the economy functioned. And yes, it is very old. It is like 200 years old or plus. But the economic theories that he talks about are very prevalent today if you just look for them. You can see them playing out. Now, one of the things that I have always got to take it down to is like, what is the basis of economics? Right? The basis of economics is survival. It's I got to eat, right? I got to eat and I got to wake up tomorrow. That's the two things that I have to have done, right? And so how is it that you're going to eat and how is it that you're going to wake up tomorrow is the two most prevalent things within the economy. And now if you think about it, everything is based off of that. Right? I was, having a discussion with this with my mom. And now Cantillon really describes how economics plays out in the Americas back before there was any kind of settlement taking place here, right? And he, of course, is picking on the Native Americans. Well, he wasn't picking on them, but he was pointing out the Native Americans as being like some incredibly like brutal savages, but they were beating each other up and killing each other for hunting grounds. They were competing over hunting grounds. Like that's survival. Like they didn't have any other choice. I'm sure they would love to say, hey man, you and me, we can exist in this world, but we can't because there's not enough food, right? There's not enough deer. And so I have to kill you and kill that deer. And so talk about like a survival of the fittest kind of time. That was it, right? But that was the economy. However much food available for the amount of people that were there. And everything starts basically being built off of that. Think about all the wars that were fought. They were always fought over territory, fought over commodities, fought over whatever, it was that was the riches at the time, because that's the survival instincts that goes all the way back down to what was described in Cantillon's essay of the Native Americans here, in the United States and all over the Americas, really, or anywhere else in the world. I would think that would take place. So this is really how the science of economics works, is that you have to look at it from that. It is the survival of the fittest, and it goes all the way down to the brutality of it. Okay? And yes, we can all sing Kumbaya, put together gardens and build houses for each other and have ways of being able to, have this society that is all functioning for all people at all times, but it doesn't work like that. Right? That's not the way it goes down. Because the moment that you have enough food for everybody, then the population will grow. And if the population grows, then you're going to find that there's going to be some people out there who are a little bit more industrious than others, and they're going to start taking advantage of the situation, and they're going to start accumulating wealth. Right? And it's not a bad thing. It's just the way it goes. And it must be understood that that is the way it goes, and that there's nothing you can do to change that. Right? It's the understanding that the move into luxuries, once you have tried hard and worked and saved and produced and acquired, that exact move into luxuries is what begins to deteriorate the economy. You can put all the force and try and attempt, and it will do some significant things. You can try and help the homeless with building tents. You can try and help the homeless with building shelters. You can try and help the homeless with, showers, but it doesn't get rid of the homeless. Those are all problems or all symptoms of the problems. The problem exists because that's the way it happens. And it's unfortunate. Yes, I would love to say, we can create a situation in which that it would be perfect for everybody, but that situation doesn't exist. It never has. Economists aren't mystics. Economists are doing their best to understand the view of the world from the best position that they have, from the point of view as many people as they can take on. But they'll never be able to understand it the way you can understand it. There's never an economist out there in the world who's going to know the position that you're in, know the things that you need in your life. They don't know if you're 18 years old trying to figure it out, where to go with your money, how to start businesses, how to be useful. They don't know if you're 80 years old trying to hold on to as much wealth as you can while you go into the remaining years, scared to the hell of inflation or whatever it is. See, these are things that take place every single day within the readings of the economy. And then people say, well, these guys are just crackpots. Yeah, it's because you're viewing the economy from your own position. Right? These people aren't crackpots. They're just giving their best point of view from the position they're in, just like I'm doing. Just like every other YouTuber or person on the internet or TV or anywhere else, any book you have ever read. Right? Understanding it from the best that you can from the economic forces that are out there, and not necessarily from the way that you believe that it should be, is probably a much better position to be in, because then you can actually recognize these economic forces for what they are, and then best try to position yourself for them. Most people think it's the government's fault. All right, we got 116 people watching with 28 likes. Come on, guys, let's go hit that like button and get this up to at least 100 likes. YouTube algorithm will love to see that. All right, Ben Bernanke had a perfect score on his SATs, but he followed Milton Friedman. No, you got to understand, you got Ben Bernanke. When it comes to the Federal Reserve and anything else and politics and all that, I do not give appreciation or credit or thankfulness or anything else to anybody out there, whatever. It's just an observation of what has taken place, right? Ben Bernanke nailed it. Ben Bernanke absolutely nailed it. Think about it. The economy is still functioning during a time in which that the monetary policy had essentially collapsed to nothing, right? And he was like, nah, I know we all just ran out of tools, but guess what? I got an idea. We got quantitative easing. We got these asset purchases. We got credible threats. We got all this stuff that we can do in order to stimulate the economy. We don't need those interest rate setting policies like we used to use. Although we'll talk about it, but we don't really need them. Right? And the fact that he was able to pull it off, and everybody thought that he was just a lame ass, didn't know what he was doing, whatever, and he's sitting over there going, yeah, who knew? Contained subprime mortgages. I didn't. Oops. Yeah. Okay, here you go. This is the reason thing is that I don't think he's that dumb, and the reason, and this is the funny part about it is that, the hardest part. And I'm not trying to say that he's smart, but the hardest part about being the smartest person in the room is to convince everybody that you're not. And everybody calling Ben Bernanke or the Fed losers and dumb and can't figure it out and don't know what they're doing are falling right into their trap. I mean, literally right into their trap in order for them to conduct themselves the way they do. It is scary to think about, but that is exactly what's happening. And if people looked at the Federal Reserve the way I look at it, which I'm not trying to say is I'm the one person out there who can see the Federal Reserve for what it is. But what I am looking at is the Federal Reserve's monetary policy alone. Like, that's it. I don't look at the fiscal policies. I don't look at, like, all the political jargon that goes on out there. I'm looking at what it is that the Federal Reserve is talking about. Do you know how many times I've brought up talking about the neutral interest rate and how much that is an important thing for the Federal Reserve, and how nobody knows exactly what's going on with it and whether or not it's rising or falling? That whole little neutral interest rate concept right there is such a far off understanding for most people who don't even know what the hell I'm talking about right now when it comes to the neutral interest rate. But yet the Federal Reserve just did a great speech. Well, who was it? Christopher Waller just did a great speech about R-star, which is the Federal Reserve's idea of where the neutral interest rate is today and how it's going to affect monetary policy. How many people are out there looking at that speech and reading it and figuring out what it's all about? Right? I mean, I read it last night, and I'm going to read it again inside of a live stream for the members only. So if you want to know what that speech is all about, you can join this channel. There's a link down in the description of this video, and you can join the channel to the members only live stream where we break down that speech word for word to know exactly what it is that the Federal Reserve is saying when it comes to that neutral interest rate. Now, again, it's just Christopher Waller's idea, right? He's a voting member of the FOMC, and he's not the Federal Reserve. So there's 12 other people who might be looking at the neutral interest rate differently. Maybe, right? What Christopher Waller says, I think, is very important to understand, because at least we can internalize the idea of what it is that this neutral interest rate means to the Federal Reserve. So, how much, let's talk about something. Hey, what do you guys want to talk about? Man, I'm just kind of going off today, aren't I? Ben Bernanke was not a stud. No, I don't think so. But he pulled off the credible threat like you wouldn't believe, right? He said he was going to do it, and he did it. And it's amazing. Like, everybody says that, no, man, he doesn't know what he's doing. And I'm like looking back at these speeches going, he said he was going to do that. He said he was going to do it 6 years before it happened. He was like, we're going to run into the lower bound of zero. We're not going to have any way of adjusting monetary policy, and there's really going to be no effective tool for it. So I got an idea. But don't talk about it too much, okay? Here's my idea. Boom. We're going to do asset purchases. We're going to tell everybody that, money's going to be printed to the moon and everything is... Volcker was a stud. Volcker was not... Volcker was a stud. Whatever. All right. Lumberjack landlord, duh, he was. He accomplished what was needed. That's the key. Yeah. And that's what's interesting about it, is it's like, once you look at it, it's not it's not an enemy and it's not a competition, right? I mean, it is a competition in the way that it's a survival of the fittest kind of thing, but it's not a competition in which it's some sort of game. This isn't a game, right? This is the real life situation that everybody now has to face. So when you look at it, it's just okay, so the economy is many parts and pieces. The Federal Reserve is part of it. And a lot of people want to look at the Federal Reserve as being the economy, or the government's the economy, or the stock market's the economy, or housing, whatever. It's all this. These are all parts and pieces when it comes to the economy. And the Federal Reserve is the financial portion of it. So if you want to interact with the economy, if you are the economy, if you are the decisions that you make, the businesses, all that other stuff. If you are to interact with other people, you don't need to use finance, right? You could go right down to the barter system, get right down to the essence of what the economy is. And you can go out there and you can hunt and survive and garden and food and do all the other stuff in order to make your world exist. Or you can start working to try and provide some of those things at a little easier fashion. Now, if you have a good idea that you might be able to expand on and create more wealth for yourself, but you don't have the money to do it, how do you get that? You got to go to somebody who says hey, man, please, man, can I borrow this money in order to make this happen? And I know you're going to take on a lot of risk because I might be not able to do it. And if they say no, you're out. That's it, man. Your idea sits there and fizzles away. But now you got this financial system that's out there that says, hey, man, you want to borrow money? You can have all the money you want. Whoa, there you go. Go run with your ideas. Go make them happen. Go go do what you got to do, right? And there's some people out there who's just yes, finally, the pizza parlor. I finally get to set it up, right? I know I can make a lot of money doing this. And somebody might say that. The other person might grab that and go woohoo, toots and whores, let's go, right? I mean, it's just how they interact with that financing is creates an economy. And just because they go and blast it on gambling and beer and good times or whatever it is out there doesn't mean that that money doesn't start flowing into the economy. And it does create the situations that we are going to face when you end up with like financial situations that start to grow and then start to collapse on each other because these people who have spent all their money on beer and hookers or whatever are now not making their payments. And just understand it in that fashion. But it could all be set aside and looked at in a different way. You can be like, I don't have to participate in any of that stuff. I can see other people participating with it. It makes this huge thing happen from it. I have to live within it. Right. And now the more I give myself meaning to that, right, the more importance I put into it, the more interactions I have to take with it, the more it's going to now affect my life. Think about it. If you're living out in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, man, like, mountain man, there ain't none of this stuff makes any difference to you. Right? Like your economy is how many bullets you got to hunt food with. Like that's your economy. Very simple. And that's the way to look at it. It's not a mystic. It's not crackpot. It's because each and every single one of us are looking at it individually. That's why it doesn't make any sense when you listen to somebody else talk about it. The credible threat and how it's communicated is through him. Are you guys still talking? Yeah. I have to get it. Like, I mean, I'm looking back at Ben Bernanke's speech. I think that's who you guys are still talking about. And I mean, I look back at some of the things that he had said at the time, and I'm like, you did not believe, just like, oh, we looking for help from the supply side, just like Jerome Powell. I knew right then, as soon as I heard those words come out of Jerome Powell, I was like, that's bullshit. Right? That's not true. That is not true. He is not thinking that. That is not just like Ben Bernanke was just like, oh, we got to contain to the subprime mortgages. It's contained or whatever. He knew it wasn't. Everybody knew it wasn't, right? And not everybody. Some people actually believed it, but just like Jerome Powell believed that there was going to be help from the supply side, but I knew it didn't, and he knew it didn't. Nobody else now believes it, so it was just like I can't possibly have called it out as easily as I did if I didn't think that it was a true lie. Right? Like if he actually believed that was to be the case, then I wouldn't have been able to call it out that easy. I mean, I'm just guessing. Because there's so many, you think about it, there's 150 top economists who work at the Federal Reserve. You think one person would be like, hey, Jerome, do you think that's actually the case, bro? Do you think that, like, if you're going to hurt the consumer, there's actually going to be manufacturers, distributors, and wholesalers who are going to step up to the plate and bring you supply? Why would they do that, yeah? I mean, they wouldn't. By that time, new money trickles down to the lower class. The money isn't worth the same. Yeah. And that, Ryan, is because of the dive into luxuries, right? It's the move into luxuries that's really causing that problem. I mean, people say, hey, man, how do we fix the economy? There's only one way to fix it, just one, right? Don't buy luxuries. Don't move into luxuries. Do not raise your standard of living. That's it, man. That is it. And that is practically impossible to say. It is not within human nature to behave in this fashion. Right? So to say, like, in order to fix the problem, do not be a human. Do not take on human characteristics. Do not do the human instinctual thing. Do not behave in a way that is going to be best appropriate for what you feel is going to be fun and desirable and enjoyable for your life, because most of the time that's a move into luxuries. So unless that drive for pleasure and happiness and all that other stuff comes without the expense of any kind of money going into the vacations, going into the cars, going into the clothing, going into all that stuff. If you can stay away from all those things, then you can prevent economy from growing and collapsing. Right? But that's the problem with it is that nobody's going to do that. Right? Nobody's going to behave in that fashion, and I don't expect it to take place. Right? What I do expect to take place is the continue on of what we have going. And that is the ever expansion of debt, the ever expansion of money at some point, the ever increasing trade deficits, the ever increasing amounts of foreign imports, and the ever increasing amounts of domestic manufacturing leaving this country. Right? You can prevent it from happening for a while. Like you can say, hey man, we're putting efforts in. Have you seen what the government has done? The whole you know, inflation thing that they were trying to do. And yeah, okay, great, man. So you're going to deter this situation for a little bit, right? You're going to keep it from continuing to exist in the fashion that the economic forces say that they're going to work because you put some effort in to deter that situation for a little bit. Is that going to, I mean, are you going to, when the problem starts to present itself again, what are you going to do? You're going to have to like take that much more effort in order to continue it on. Put that many more tariffs on there. Put that much ever more subsidies into the manufacturing. Yeah. It's not something you can prevent, right? Each and every single one of us together could prevent it if we were to think, understand, and know that that move into luxuries is what's causing the problem. But nobody, like, I want a new Camaro. Like, I mean, it's just like, can I limit my luxuries to just the Camaro and then I will turn off the idea of buying luxuries? Hell no, right? I'm going to buy the Camaro and then I'm going to buy something else, right? Because that's the way it goes down. Because if you earn money, you want to spend money. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. Suck it up, buttercup, and do the best you can. All right, let's see here. Lumberjack Landlord says, I always like to understand if someone has used what they believe to become wealthy. All right. Make delayed gratification sexy. There you go, All-Nighter. I like that one. Yeah. And that's just it. Like, it's funny. Like, what is it is important to people? Like, what is it is that's important to, like, to your success? Like, what is it that's going to mean success to you? Yeah. I hear a lot of people talk about, like, man, millions of dollars, 10 million, $100 million, like, wow, jeez, what would I don't even know what I would do with that much money, It was like, I guess I would travel more, I'd probably eat more, food, or better food or something. Like, I think of, like, the things that I would do, and I'm like, I just want more time to spend with my family. Like, I don't want, I mean, it would be fun to do fun things with them, like go places and stuff like that. But I don't want to have to work so damn hard, take so much time away from experiences with them in order to provide the fundings I need to go and have experience with them, but only to miss out on having those experiences because I'm spending so much time trying to acquire the funds I need to go and have experiences with them. Like, that's like, what the world, like, that's not the way it's supposed to go down. I mean, that's ultimately, you have to ask yourself, like, how much and how far and what it is that I want in my world. And the move into luxuries that people are doing is the reason. Like, I mean, if you're looking for anything, that's it. People are awesome at production and savings. That's the natural thing about humans, is that they want to be producers and savers. And that's what's cool about it, is that if you give them the environment in which they can be producers and savers, and that production and savings actually encourages them because they can actually raise their standard of living, you are not going to find a better group of people. That is the moment, but it's short-lived. It has a run rate to it. And once it's over, it's over. I mean, I would love to see it continue on and be something that can just be continuous forever. But the only system that I can find that actually has an attempt at doing that are communistic, socialistic type of governments. Don't wish for it. Free market capitalism produces that rich concept of the working class citizen being able to provide this wonderful life, but it is short-lived. Right? The move into luxuries will force out the domestic manufacturers and drive in force out the domestic manufacturers and drive in the foreign production. And there's nothing that can really change about that. Angry Capitalist, $10. Do you see any indication of future money policy based on people and speeches currently in the Fed, like how previous chairs set policy that we are experiencing? Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, Angry Capitalist, for the $10. I really appreciate that. Okay, so the question, do you see any indication of future money policy based on people and speeches currently in the Fed? So there's a lot of monetary policy within the Fed right now that they're speaking of, and yes, I do. Like how previous chairs set policy that we are now experiencing. Well, let's think about the previous chairs. Like, I mean, really, like even if you were just like, just leave it at Jerome Powell, all right? And what he was saying within the monetary policy at the end of the Trump administration, because even some of the things that he was talking about back then are different, and the shift in monetary policy that had taken place and what we are experiencing today is very much misunderstood when it comes to what it is that most economists and most people believe that the Federal Reserve is attempting to achieve. Because really, we only have our understanding of like anything out there from the experiences that we've had with them, right? Whether it's a person or place or anything else, like, some people are like, no, that dude's an asshole. It's like, how can you believe it? Hey, man, that guy's great, But it was the experiences that you had, right? And that's the only thing you have. And so most people are basing their ideas of what it is that the Federal Reserve is doing, not off of their words, because they're not really easily interpreted, but based off of the ideas of what it is that they had done in the past. Right. And that's where I think like a lot of the communications that now come from the Federal Reserve are are what's guiding the markets based off of their interpretations of what they had experienced from the past coming from the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve uses that. Remember, it's like their communications are more important than the actual actions coming from the Federal Reserve, right? Like th- they know that adjustment of interest rates is not the effective tool. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work like it did. But nobody knows that. And that's the weirdest thing about this like everything within my theories of credible threats and things that I've been putting on my videos lately is nobody knows it. Nobody knows that the adjustment of monetary policy isn't an effective tool. They're all waiting for interest rate adjustments. They all know that that's what it is. It's not. It's not it. And that's like, it's the hardest thing that I've been trying to explain to people over, pretty much since I've heard, the idea of the flexible average inflation targeting, right? Once I understood that there was a change, a shift, a new concept to the monetary policy that is so far different from anything that we had experienced before, it doesn't relate. Like, we have to know that their monetary policy is not an adjustment of interest rates, but literally the communications of it. Right? And we have to know why. You know why that is. Right? We know that the reason why that the adjustment of interest rates is no longer the effective tool is because of the lower bound of zero. And yes, they have increased their Fed funds rate up to 5.5, whatever you want to say. But the neutral interest rate, which again we are going to discuss in a live stream for members only, probably tomorrow. I'll leave a link for it at some point. But when we look at that neutral interest rate, R star is the way the Federal Reserve refers to it. When we look at that neutral interest rate, it is so close to zero, trying to stimulate the economy becomes almost impossible, as the Federal Reserve cannot drop interest rates far enough below that neutral interest rate before running into the lower bound of zero. Doesn't work. Right? And so now even here, when we think about like some of the effectiveness of what happens when the Federal Reserve does adjust interest rates from the past to what we would experience today, you can see that it's not an effective tool, because in the past, when the Federal Reserve would raise interest rates, we would almost always see an instantaneous run into a recession. And although a lot of people are talking about it, we haven't experienced it yet. In fact, we're seeing low unemployment. We're seeing an economy that's running hot, because the adjustment of interest rates is no longer the effective tool, but the idea did, right? The idea caused a lot of like changes to the economy as people began to behave differently. Think about what happened to mortgage rates the moment that the Federal Reserve started raising rates. It shot up almost instantaneously, but they did not keep lockstep with the Federal Reserve. Why? Because the market set that rate, not the Fed. Although everybody wants to believe differently, they want to say the Federal Reserve did it. Nah, that's not the case. All right. If the Federal Reserve was setting those mortgage rates, then they would have worked in lockstep with the Federal Reserve in the adjustment of their Fed funds rates. It didn't go like that. Right? The moment that they started dumping those mortgage-backed securities out there to the market went like, okay, we got to find equilibrium here. Boom, right around 7-8%. Okay, we'll drop it down to 6 occasionally. There's some people out there who can find some good deals, but this is where the mortgages are going to be, because this is our price as investors looking for fixed income investments. And like understanding it, like just like understand it from that view. It's like, A lot of people want to say this is going to cause this to happen and the Federal Reserve is going to allow the whole world to suffer and pain and misery and all this other stuff. Yeah, I know. I've done the same videos, titled them. But what's the truth of the matter? The Federal Reserve, if they are trying to fight inflation, needs unemployment to rise so that people don't earn as much money, so they don't participate in the economy to lower the consumption in order to bring in supply. That's how the Federal Reserve used to operate. And by raising interest rates, they would make investment into operations, business, conducting people, people conducting themselves within the economy became burdensome. See, everybody looks at it and says they want to raise the interest rates and then hurt the consumer. Well, yeah, in the end, they really want to do is hurt employment, right? Because employment eventually leads into consumer. But it doesn't work anymore. We see it. It's not working, and maybe it will over time, maybe it won't, right? But at this point, it's still not working. It's still not doing it. And so this is now understanding it from this point of view is that their words do work, though. And that words is all about the belief of how they are going to adjust those interest rates, which don't matter. And it's like, again, I don't know how, I mean, I've broken this down so many times. I don't know how to explain it any other way than that. And it is a psychological game that they are playing, most definitely. All right, man, look at all these comments right on. Okay. Watermelon, nobody's buying a house, only companies are buying houses. That's not true, Watermelon. I absolutely agree with you, all-nighter. Watermelon, people not true, just need to save longer. Yeah. Yes, it is a mass majority of buying homes in California that is done by companies. I mean, I understand that people want to put blame on it. Okay. And yes, fine. There's rich people out there buying up all the houses. Guess what? That is described right here. Okay. So, I mean, if you want to understand why it's happening, you don't have to blame politics. You don't have to blame, anything out there. You don't have to blame rich, greedy people. I mean, I guess you can, but it's right here. So it's like, it's not, it's not anything new. That's for sure. It's not like, something that is just like, oh, I mean, it's new to America because the transitions that takes place from being a industrious people who bring in a lot of foreign money through the production and manufacturing. But when you go from that to being a debtor nation who is living off of the production of the world, things look very different. They don't look the same way anymore. And I totally agree that the average everyday person can buy a house, but you can't do it the way that you used to, right? That's why the economy is changing, all right? I mean, or why you have to adapt to the way the economy is changing and to understand that, right? Like it's, I don't know how many times I've said this, but it's like being in the camp when the bear comes in, right? You don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than everybody else, right? The bear's going to get somebody else. Let him get somebody else, man. You got to do something different. You're not going to work 9 to 5 and save enough money to do it. You're going to have to team up with somebody. If you do happen to have the 9 to 5 that you worked hard and got the inheritance, have a good luck on a lottery ticket, whatever it is that you ended up with the money to be able to put down on a house, it's very difficult to make the payments. Try house hacking, right? Try the idea of living on the property but renting out the property to somebody else. Let them make the payments on it, right? There's ways to get in. Like, I'm no expert on this. I don't know anything about it. I've never really done it myself, but there are people out there like Lumberjack Landlord and his group that have, and they are totally willing to share their information on how that is done. It's like, that's where people, like, I think get lost within the economy itself, is they think like like there's evil things happening. It's not. It's just survival of the fittest. And if you think all the way down to the Native Americans who had to fight over hunting grounds, that's the same thing that's taking place right now. There's no difference, right? A little more civilized, that's it. But is it really that civilized? I mean, you think about it, there's people out there who are living in suffering and pain and misery and bad health and all kinds of stuff, right? And how rich is it that other people are out there? Yeah, guess what? There's hunters and there's people who can't hunt. Right? There's people who fight and people who are weak. There's people who survive and people who can't survive. And that's all there is to it. And understanding it to that sort of level will then at least give you the ability to then say, man, I know other people are doing it this way. I can't. I'm going to go for mine. Sorry. See y'all, like I'm going to run faster than you all in this camp. You know? I'm not blaming. I'm just an easy observation. Incomes are going down, house prices are going up, therefore less people can afford them, less people are buying them, more companies have better opportunity. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's just I mean that's true. I mean true. What else are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do about it, man? I mean, you're not gonna change anything about it. It's just the way it's gonna go down. Like, I mean, you can have government force come in and say like, oh no, we can make things different, and we can put our foot down on all kinds of like ways that people are conducting themselves, but it isn't gonna help. I mean, if they could do that, they would have done that already, right? See, it's better to understand like why it is that it was easy before and why it's difficult now and why it's not going to become easy again. Right? It's just know it. Like we have easy ways that they didn't have back in the day. You know how easy it is to communicate and buy stuff now? You know how hard it was back in the day? So back in the day, you used to be able to get a house easy. Now it's easy to get stuff. Hey, it's one trade one for the other, right? I mean, a real estate agent called my mother asking if she's interested in selling that he has a buyer that likes the area. All right. Lumberjack says it's bigger than that. Plenty are still buying, millions of transactions. Biggest mistake is people thinking their circumstances are everyone's, right? Almost 50% of houses have no mortgages. Yeah, that's right. And go and look up underwater mortgages right now. Like how many houses are actually underwater comparatively to prior to the pandemic? I forget what the exact numbers were. We did a video on it a while back, but it was something like less than 3% of mortgages right now are underwater. Like less than 3%, right? You know why? Is because hardly any houses have been sold over the last couple of years. And over the last couple of years is only the opportunity that there has been for houses to actually come down on those mortgages. So because very few people are actually buying houses at the high price, in order for there to be underwater mortgages, there would have to have been a lot of houses sold at those high prices. There just simply wasn't that many. So most people actually had underwater mortgage. More people had underwater mortgages prior to the pandemic. But because house prices have risen as much as they have, and because the interest rates have risen as well, and they are not refinancing and not moving, they are staying put, those houses are now worth more than they were prior to the pandemic and therefore are no longer underwater mortgages. You see what's happening here? Like these houses, like the housing market looks phenomenal. Not statistically speaking from the interest rate side of things, but when you consider that there is a lack of inventory out there, that's good for prices. Not good for people to buy houses, but just good for the prices if you think high prices are good, right? Especially if you're a buyer. See, this is like and this is not something that is going to change because this is something that happens from the new money pouring into the system. Right? This is why there is a separation between the rich and the poor. This is the sign of it. Leases and rents on properties. This is a sign of abundance of money being in the system. And it's like, just, you have to know it. You have to know and understand this is what's going on. Very few geez, man, I'm losing my ability to speak here. Very few underwater mortgages, very few foreclosure notices, and even fewer trustee sales due to foreclosure. See, I mean, times could change. I'm not saying that they couldn't, right? And this is where I think a lot of times where you find, like, say, the Crash Bros out there are talking about a possibility of what could come in the future. And yeah, if you embellish that story, if you make it seem inevitable, if you are putting forth like the idea that it's taking place right now, it can be very concerning for a lot of people, especially those who are looking to try and buy a house. Because if they are in a position in which that they can, talk about the anxiety level that is now ripping through them when they believe that there is going to be a crash in the housing market. And I know what this feeling is like because I experienced this exact thing, only to experience quite the opposite in reality, right? Where the house price went dramatically higher in price. I am far from underwater. Like, everything worked out way better than I had ever possibly imagined. And it was definitely everything that I had feared didn't come to fruition. Right? The interest rates rose, but the house prices didn't crash. That was my number one concern, is that the interest rates were going to go up and that the house price was going to come down. The only thankful thing that I had at the time was that I was getting a low interest rate on the loan. I look back on that and I could not have timed it any better. I mean, I probably could have timed it better for the house price because they were moving up at the time. But considering how much it's moved up since then, I couldn't have asked for a better timing on it. 3.125% interest. Thank you, Lumberjack Landlord, man. Exactly right, UE. Supply demand, when unemployment moves up aggressively, housing will then stumble. Not till then. Yeah, and I think that's the case. I think unemployment is the key to pretty much everything when it comes to the shift in monetary policy that could possibly take place. It's going to really come down to unemployment. That's it, right? And when I think about the things that I have read, when I think about the experiences that we have had since hitting the lower bound of zero back during the great financial crisis, and the understanding of what is happening with the Fed funds rates and how it is no longer the effective tool, right? Raising the Fed funds rate was typically going to be a surefire way to rise unemployment. It was like almost like, you raise the Fed funds rate, you might as well just kiss your job goodbye. But it didn't happen this time, and I predicted it. Right? And I didn't predict it in the fashion like, hey man, I'm so smart, I got this, right? I predicted it in the sense that says, wait a minute here, we have already got a bailout taking place within the system prior to the Fed raising rates. All these corporations gorged on cheap debt using the special purpose vehicles and the bailout during the pandemic, right? So here I had this already, like, looking at it going, wait a minute, the corporations are sitting on cash. They're there, and there's all this unemployed, like all these help wanted signs everywhere. I'm like, whoa, no, this is already bailed out. This is already bailed out. Like, we're going into recession with an already bailed out economy, right? As people lose their jobs from these particular corporations, they're going to go to work flipping burgers, serving beers, right? Doing whatever, service industry stuff, making up beds. Like that, I mean, I called that so long ago, and this is what we're experiencing now, because the rise in interest rates didn't do what most people would thought it would have done, and that is create the recessionary pressures that would cause unemployment to rise. Now, granted, I believe that the Federal Reserve is trying to push that narrative out there to get the unemployment to rise so that inflation will come down to meet their long-term inflation expectations of 2% targeting over time, whatever the hell that means, right? Because they don't give any kind of mathematical formula for it. So that's the way I see it, anyway. How do you think the yield curve will become uninverted once again? By the way, flipping burgers in California will pay you $50,000 a year, right? See, there was a time. Now think about it, man. I think I'm going to say something about the yield curve here in just a second, but I want to talk about those burger flipping, because you imagine buying a house about 15 years ago or so? Like, if you were able to get into a house 15 years ago, you would probably have very low payments, and flipping burgers right now might be a job that would make your house payment. In fact, it probably would. In fact, that house payment would probably be cheaper than any place else you could rent, right? See, this is the thing about inflation that people forget about. They talk about inflation being so painful and stuff like that, but they don't take into consideration that kind of thing, right? That some dude flipping burgers now might be able to make his house payments if he was able to stick it out long enough. All right. So the other part of that, and I'm just, that's just me babbling, but the other part of this, the yield curve inversion. Now, this is where most people are talking about the 10-year, 2-year, right? Now, the 10-year, 2-year is an indication of a possible recession coming, and typically that recession comes when it uninverts. And I believe that's what the question Dark Brother is asking. So if we talk about like the idea of the yield curve uninverting and then triggering the recession, it is very, very likely that that could be the case. Now, what is happening there is that most of the time when you have a 2-year inversion from the 10-year, and the way that the best to understand that is typically when it comes to the yield curve is that short-term duration would pay a lesser interest rate than long-term duration. Just like anything else, like if you're taking out a 15-year loan as opposed to a 30-year loan. If you take out a 15-year loan on a mortgage, you're going to pay a lesser interest rate than if you take out a 30-year. Treasuries are very much the same way, right? So if you're looking at the treasuries, a typical yield curve would be a steepening one as you go out longer on the maturity line. However, during times of market stress or concern or risk, or just, people are like, man, I don't know, cash is a much better place for me because I think that there's buying opportunity coming into the future. Well, then the treasury yields on the short term starts to rise more dramatically than the long term. So I guess a good way to understand this is that if I'm concerned about the future, then I'm going to have a higher risk involved. But if my risk of the current present time is higher than the future, then I'm going to demand a higher interest for today. And this is like the easiest way to understand how a yield curve inverts, right? So now the short term is paying a higher price on the yield than the long term, which isn't typical, right? So this is the inverted yield curve. And it's showing market like stress, conditions, risk, whatever, as far as the future goes. Typically, when the Federal Reserve goes and raises interest rates and starts creating a situation in which that the economy is now slowing down dramatically, what you will find is that the recessionary pressures begin to fall into the economy, and the long-term risk starts to rise as well, and the short-term risk starts to be alleviated as the Federal Reserve fires up the possibility of quantitative easings or just stimulated programs, which buys into the short-term part of the yield, right? Which then ends up lowering the yield curve down. And this is the stimulus packages that go out there, and why you end up seeing a recession taking place when the yield curve uninverts. So that's like, at least that's the simplest way to kind of explain how that goes down. All right. After explaining that and kind of oversimplifying it a bit, I don't look at the yield curve anymore. I don't look at it as being anything as far as like what's going to cause or predict or be a recessionary indicator, although it is a very, 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 very good one. What I'm going to be looking at is what Alan Greenspan responded to when he was asked about the inverted yield curve. And what he said is the 5-year, 30-year, and the spread between the two. And when you see the spread between the two begin to widen, it is he says it's a sign of corporate management's willingness to invest, and it is a very good sign for the economy. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that all means, but when I think about what it is that Alan Greenspan knows about the economy, and knowing that there is a spread between the 5-year, 30-year that I am watching, which is very close, not spreading very wide at all, I am not very encouraged about what's taking place within the economy at this time. So that's the spread that I'm watching, not so much the yield curve, which again is a very, 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 very good indicator. I think mine is probably going to be more focused in on that 30-year, 5-year, 30-year spread. And again, like that's about as much as I could possibly tell you about it without just giving you more theorized ideas of what's going on within the economy today. And that's investment stuff that I'm not really much into doing. I'm not into giving investment advice because I don't really do investments. All right. The message was retracted. Bummer. $4.99. Thank you very much for the super sticker, at least. All right. UE is helping you manage your way through the broken system, and it's greatly appreciated. Yes, Watermelon people, thank you so much for that great comment. I mean, this is it, man. Like, I mean, You know, the decisions that Matthew, the lumberjack landlord, what he is doing with his life is going to be very different from me and mine. Now, I can try and simulate a lot of what he is doing, and he's willing to help me out with a lot of the information and understanding of what he has. But the two of us conduct ourselves very differently. Like, we're not doing the same things, but we have to deal with the same economy. We're both looking at the same information. We're both processing this stuff to make the best decisions for ourselves, even though we're not doing the same thing, right? Just like everybody else out there. And it's important to understand that, because like what it is that you have for your life is unique to you, right? But you can do anything you want. That's what's awesome about it. Is just like you want to be the landlord with 100 doors. That's in your future, man. That's a parallel in your life that you can accomplish, right? I mean, it's out there. There's anything any possibility in the entire world is available to you. It is just that is literally like winning the lottery all the way to being on the streets broke as hell, right? All those possibilities exist within your realm, right? And like understanding that in knowing it is probably the key to it all, because most people don't believe that they have that available to them. Like most people look at the world and say, "Man, what is it that I need to do in order to acquire these things?" Not knowing that they already have it. Right? They just literally need to start doing it. It's a matter of of being like on the fork that starts sending you down that road, right? You're getting down this way, you got to deviate, right? And it's not going to happen instantaneously. It happens at the end of it. When you start traveling down, you start deviating away from what you were originally doing. You're moving off on a new path. You know, that's why, like, for me, anyway, here we go. We're getting into the psychological stuff. Okay, so for me, anyway, it was alcohol, right? Alcohol was the major shift for me, and it didn't happen right away. And that's where, like, I think most people end up suffering the consequences of falling back into alcoholism, is because they don't stick around long enough to actually see it start to work, because it is so slow. Like years go by before you really start seeing how the benefits start to work, and even more years go oh gee whiz, even more years go by before you really start to feel the impacts of it, and then even more go by before you start appreciating it. Right? So it takes a long time before it actually starts to take place, that quitting the drugs and alcohol and changing your life becomes something that you look back on and you go like, "Oh man, thank God I did that." It was a long road. It took forever. It was hard work. There was a lot of suffering. There was pain. There was misery. There was crying. There was suffering again. And here we are today, and it ain't so bad. Right? Like I look back on things and it's just like, yeah, it sucked then, but I guess it wasn't so bad, right? Going through it all. And that's where most people end up quitting. They're like, "Man, this is too much. I can't take it anymore." Right? All right, Lorenzo, 499. Hi, Simon. What's your thoughts on the shelf life of credible threat theory? What effects of forward guidance fade in the Fed never follows through? Well, I mean, think about it right now. How many people, like, how effective have the credible threats been for the last, I mean, it's been going on for a while, but let's just take the last 6 months, for example, right? Like, how many people, every single article I read is talking about, like, what the possibilities of what it is that the Federal Reserve is going to do, right? 6 months ago, it was not if, but when the Federal Reserve is going to be cutting 5 or 7, doing 5 or 7 interest rate cuts. Like that was the question. Like people were like, "Okay, hey bro, so now after the Federal Reserve has committed to interest rate cuts this year, do you think they're going to be doing 5 or 7, and in what month do you think they're actually going to start doing this?" And I'm like, "What are you all talking about?" Like I have no clue of this interest rate cutting that they have promised to do. Like to me, that's like I don't understand this. This is like, are you talking about the plot thing? Oh, right? Like that's not a promise. And this is working. Like this is working so well. In fact, it's working so well that unless people start talking about flexible average inflation targeting, also known as FAIT, F-A-I-T. I mean, just go Google it. Go Google Federal Reserve FAIT, F-A-I-T. You can find all kinds of information on it. Go and type in flexible average inflation targeting into YouTube. And outside of my videos, go and look how many people are actually talking about flexible average inflation targeting. Almost none. You can find a short clip from like, I don't know, CNBC from like maybe, I don't know, from August of 2020 when Jerome Powell said it. And I think there was maybe 22,000 views on that video. And that was the most popular video that I could find on flexible average inflation targeting outside of the videos that I've done, right? Because I'm so adamant about it, making sure that everybody knows that there's no such thing as a 2% target. Right? It just doesn't exist. It just simply is absolutely illusion, delusion, imagination. I don't even know. Psyops. It's just like, it just blows me away how many people are convinced, how they have been suckered into that belief, and how the Federal Reserve is totally using it for their advantage, and it's working. It like works. It's so surprising. Like, I mean, I was just like, how, I mean, if that's the way they're going to do it, then I mean, I'll just have to make the decisions best for myself to understand it the way I do, which is that their movement of interest rates is not the effective tool, but the communications of it. And I just look at the communications and say, okay, well, I see that you're all acting like you're a bunch of doves, or you're all acting like you're a bunch of hawks. And that then starts bleeding into the real economy as people start to adjust their interest rate beliefs. And you can see it happening within things like mortgages and house purchases and places in the stock market and all kinds of stuff. I mean, all kinds of activity begins to take place within the markets when you see the narrative change within the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve the whole time is sitting on their hands doing nothing different at all, and that's what blows me away. And so when you say like, how long will it last? Forever, I think. I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem to be fading. So, nobody, until, like I said, until people start talking about flexible average inflation targeting, but instead believe about a 2% target instead that the Federal Reserve is attempting to achieve, the credible threat theory will work. That's all there is to it, because they've already got them working. Like, just the idea of a 2% target is the credible threat within its own. And nobody knows it. They actually believe that. All right, moving on. All right. What did Hyder say? Dual income, then double consumption due to divorce. Yeah, correct, Hyder. Yeah. All right. Have a family and get earned income credit. I have 4 kids with no college degree. God always provides. Yeah, well, I don't get any of that because I get too much income. So maybe I should quit YouTube and just do the lumberyard or something. All right. The cookie channel. If mortgage lenders didn't get irresponsibly greedy, we would not have needed Bernanke's moves. No, I don't think that's right, Cookie. All right. Yeah, even the all-nighter, or not all-nighter, but lumberjack landlord says the same thing. Okay, people get too caught up in the dopamine hit of buying the thing rather than looking at why they want the thing. So many won't be able to retire. How many years you got sober? I don't know. I don't know exactly the day that I got sober, like the last drink that I had. I don't even really remember like giving it up. I just remember like I just had stopped. And I remember like it was like I had kind of quit a couple of times. I wasn't drinking as much, but I was still drinking. And so sometime like in the first year of Freddie's life that I had given that last drink up. And so he's 9 now. And so it was like been 8-9 years, something like that. Quite a while. Sarah knows exactly. She went to rehab, did the whole in-house rehabilitation thing, 30 days, and that helped me out quite a bit because I got a lot of residual from that, like just her learning and understanding of what it is, alcoholism is, and trying to overcome it and stuff. So I was able to get a lot from her. Same thing with the Alcoholic Anonymous, doing the AA. I didn't do AA. I didn't go to any of the meetings. Well, I did go to some of the meetings. I shouldn't say that, but I didn't really participate with, like, going through the steps or any of that stuff. But I did get a lot of residual again from my wife, who did do that and was very, much involved with it. And so, I have to thank her for a lot of it, because really without that, then I probably wouldn't have gotten a lot of the understanding of what was taking place at the time. All right. Get off the alcohol. I'm on my way to a memorial service for a friend who died of liver failure at 42. I mean, I've had a couple of friends, My friend Ginny passed away, a while back. Gosh, it's probably been a couple of years now. Crazy. And it was sad because, like, we all could see it. Like, she was turning colors and stuff like that. All the way up until one day she wasn't there, and that was that. All right, when are you going to have Robert from Rich Dad Poor Dad on your show? I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. If he's at the Rebel Capitalist, maybe I'll ask him. You need to eventually set yourself up with capital gains for incomes. 15 to 20% is a good tax rate compared to income tax rate. Yeah, that's what I really need to do. The reaction I get from people when they hear I don't drink is kind of sad and is indicative of where society is at. Mar154, I kind of agree with that. In fact, I found that because I'm not a drinker, that I really don't have, like, these social interactions that I used to with people. Like, people, when they drink, they loosen up. And when they loosen up, it's a lot more fun, right? And unless like, I'm not a very extroverted person. Like, I'm very introverted. And so things like small talk kind of conversations really annoy the hell out of me. Like, oh, damn, how's the weather, BS? Ugh, right? If it's not a deep, meaningful conversation, if it's not something that is just like, I feel like I'm getting some value out of it, then I don't really like having the conversation. I find very uncomfortable. And that's where, like, drinking alcohol, or a little bit, just having a couple of beers loosens it up, and then, like, it's no problem, man. Like, small talk, sure, man, let's talk about the weather, beautiful. I love it when the sun's beating on my face, when it's like I can talk about it, right? So, anyway, I find, like, that kind of thing has really kind of left my life. Like, I don't have those same kind of interactions like I used to, and I somewhat miss that. Right? And it's difficult to find it because, like, when you do meet people and they're like, oh, hey, cool, let's, you want to come over and we'll drink a bunch of beers or have whatever. And it's just like, well, I'd love to come over and hang out, but I don't drink. And they're like, oh, well, all the rest of us are, and we're going to get kind of inebriated, and we don't like really being around sober people. So, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, you can come over. And, like, all of a sudden now you got this weird energy shift thing happening. So, anyhow, yeah. Different times, right? Deep, meaningful conversations. I relate to that so much. Yeah, Buzztune. I mean, I do. Like, some people, it just blows me away how they can just walk into a room, meet some stranger, and just immediately strike up conversation about something that doesn't have any kind of meaning. Nothing, like, it's total superficial. Like, I kind of almost envy that. Like, I'm like, man, how do you do that? That's so cool. Like, I think that's actually kind of cool. Yeah. I don't think about that negatively. Like, I just don't understand how to do that, Unless I have a couple of beers. You get a couple of beers to me, I could do it all day. All right. It's always been survival of the fittest. Adapt or die. Understand the monetary environment we live in and adapt to it regardless of how much you hate it. You can't influence it. That's right. Well, that is so true. And hey, I mean, I would love for it to be a different way, right? But, like, that's not the way it is. It's just understanding that's just not the way it goes down, and it's just best to understand it. I really don't miss drinking at all. Yeah, I don't either all nighter. I mean, that's not true. There's times I do, but not really. I hate small talk too. Funny that you make YouTube videos despite being such an introvert. Yeah, and that's where I found like actually most people who actually do stuff like this are introverted people. They like I do extremely extroverted things when I'm not doing my introverted self. Like I get out there, I call bingo, do this YouTube thing. My job throughout the day is engaging with a lot of people, right? Like all day long, I'm sitting there engaging with people. And then at the end of that, like I find no better satisfaction than to sit in silence in the middle of nowhere without anybody talking or saying anything and nothing happening. And I can just be there with my own quiet thoughts, right? And that is like, and I need that for a while after experiencing like a day of doing sales or just whatever it is going on out there. But it's like, it's the flip side of things, and so, where most people like, I've had extroverted friends who at the end of the day of work would be excited about going to the bar to hang out and like hang out with friends and go dancing or something like that. And I'm like, hell no. Like I am going to go find some place where there ain't anybody for a while. All right. That's the last thing I want to do. And it's amazing to think about that energy difference within people, who ones who's like getting off of work and is ready to go get charged up off of being social. And another one is just like, no, I'm like, I am done doing all this. I need to go and be quiet for a while, right? I'm introverted, doesn't like small talk, but a subject I am passionate about, you can't shut me up. Yeah, and that's the way most people are when it comes to like that, introverted style. Is that if you do find something that triggers their stimulates their thoughts and their conversation, then they'll really get deep into it. I mean, you'll have a meaningful conversation with them. Sometimes it's almost too deep, right? In democracy, people still have a say. Democracy is the only reason America became so great. Uh, the big cat, I have mixed feelings about democracy. I mean, I agree that, there's a lot of wonderful things about democracy that you can appreciate, but there's also a couple of things that I don't. And one of them is that not everything should come down to a vote, right? Not everything. And, if you have a situation in which that your rights are now being voted on, right? It's like, no, this is mine. This is my personal stuff. This is my personal possessions. This is, my personal idea, whatever it is. And everybody else says, hey, you know what? You're right. It is. But for the greater good of everybody else, we're going to have to take it from you. Because really what you're doing is not benefiting the rest of society. And you're going to vote too. Don't worry, but it's like, majority rule. So, anyhow, that's just the way it is because we live in a democracy. So this is going to come down to a vote now, right? And that's the unfortunate part of it, right? Now, yeah, there's all the wonderful things about being able to vote for the elected leaders that are the ones of your choice and stuff like that, and not have to live under some kind of like, authoritarian rule. But not everything democracy is wonderful. How is the housing market in 2024 so far? Well, here we are almost halfway through, and I think it seems to be rolling along just fine. All right, Sigma male. Bars are for singles. Bars are for singles, for sex, drugs, rock and roll. I guess what bar you go to. The best possible thing about democracy is the separation of power. Bars are for the broken. Majority will vote for wealth redistribution. Yeah, I agree with that. I hated going to bars single because some D-bag will try and start a fight. Wow. I spent my entire life in the bar. I never had experiences that were all that, like, I mean, I had deterioration of mental health, but I never really had like any kind of experiences with people like I was going to get into a fight or something like that. Like, I can't think of that, I can't think of times like that, you know. Well, Simon, some of us like living in an educated, civilized society with utilities. Okay. Yeah, no doubt about it. Right. And that's where I'm saying is like, you know, the understanding of what it is that you're giving up in order to acquire the things that you need. We live in a great society and people are saying, oh man, these, you know, rich bastards out there who are greedy and, you know, suck off the lower classes or whatever. And I'm thinking, you know, we have some pretty nice stuff here in this country, right? Like, I don't blame those rich people for wanting to be rich. I want to be rich someday. I don't want to be punished for it. Right? These are like, you know, I mean, I just look at things for the way they are. I'm not trying to say that, you know, you don't deserve to have wonderful things in your life. I'm not saying you don't deserve to have the most luxurious things in your life. Everybody deserves to have something in their life that they worked hard for. I'm just saying by doing it, it's going to create the issues of a collapse into poverty and misery. I mean, it's not good or bad. I don't know. I mean, it's just what it is. All right, Doug Casey describes democracy as a mob rule. He's not wrong. See, that's I mean that's kind of what I said. I just not in so many words, or in so few words, I guess. All right, we were supposed to be a constitutional republic. That's exactly right. We were supposed to be a constitutional republic, and most people don't even understand what that means. All right, haha. If you were always getting into fights at bars, you are the problem. I almost have to kind of go with that one. All right, the big cat, you are conflating modern contravents with political theory. It does not follow. All right, mystics, they are Simon. Oh, Benny. Good to see you up in here, brother. All right, people want to play by the rules, but the rules are applied to the winners. Another thought is to move out of the states and live in a third world country like Mexico. Democracy is a dirty word, only one step from oligarchy. Isn't that funny how, like, isn't that funny, like, you know, when you hear democracy, like those of us who kind of understand constitution, understand, like, you know, what it is to be a constitutional person, individual, and you look at democracy and you're thinking, man, I'm not a fan. All right. And yet all these people out there are saying, no, man, this democracy is a great, wonderful thing that we spread all over the globe and all this other stuff. And yet constitutional freedom loving people are going, I don't like it. Not a good idea. No. Isn't that, like, you know, I find that very interesting, you know, how, I mean, I understand it from my point of view, but what I find is that a lot of constitutional American sovereign type thinkers see it that same way, you know. So what is that? I need to fish as Simonistic. All right, howdy hider, democracy, demonocracy. That's what it says. All right, I think people in Congress need to get rid of the filibuster and push things with simple majorities. Um, Man, I couldn't tell you the appropriate way for Congress to run because I just don't feel that they have our best interest in mind. So would honestly like to move towards something where I don't have to function with the idea of government involvement. Like the use of smart contracts, in my opinion, would be an excellent way for us to move away from the current situation of the judicial systems that we use, the governments that we use, even like just the way that we conduct ourselves within like business transactions and stuff. If we were to go into smart contract applications and use these for our daily lives, we could really make like government and judicial systems and lawyers and all these laws and everything pretty much obsolete. Like, or not even obsolete, just irrelevant. You know? And that to me is like cool. All right. That to me would be very cool. The more we can make government irrelevant in our lives, and although we would have to base it on a technology and we would have to suffer the ideas of that, but anytime you can get government out of involvement out of our lives, or at least out of my life, I'm encouraging that idea. Like, I am cool with that. Constitution restricts governmental overreach with limits based on human rights and Christian morals. I look at rich countries, they are all democracies with massive public sectors. How do we explain that? It's because those people were very industrious. The industriousness of those people were able to become producers and savers. Those producers and savers were able to export a lot of their hardworking manufacturing to countries in which that they needed it. They were able to then import the wealth of those other nations, which then gave them a rise in power that then said, hey, we need power here to control all this hard work and dedication and saving and production that you have done. And this is the best way to do it so that we can control without having any kind of real uprising of the people to overthrow the governments, and we can say it's for you, by you, and make it like a wonderful concept that we spread around the world. Did I get it? Did I get it right? Could our nations adopt the U.S. Constitution as theirs? Could other nations? Well, they could just, like, I mean, I guess if they wrote out a constitution and voted it in, but I doubt even our nation would vote one in, so. I mean, if we don't follow our own constitution, I don't know why anybody else would follow their own, follow one like ours. Wow, can't anyone just look at this even slightly differently from the Fox business point of view? What are you talking about? I don't know the last time I even seen a Fox News article. All right. Very libertarian of you, Simon. Yeah, I have always been very libertarian minded. Simon, thoughts on investing in growing regions of the South America? There are a lot of infrastructure updates taking place throughout the region, and for the most part, pretty stable and resource rich. Well, I'm thinking that if you're going to have any shot at anything, I would invest in, think like the capitalist, right? Be the capitalist, the guy who invests into the system that's going to pay him back, right? And now you can try and invest into a system that says, no, I want it to be an American, I want it to be American, and I want it to look like America, and I want it to have all these American colors and looks and feel to it, and I want it all to be that way. Okay, that's fine. The hard work, right? You got to go and find where it is that you can invest and do that. Or you can find the places that it's actually taking place in, and you can invest in those, right? That's buy low, sell high, no matter how you look at it, And that's what you're going to have to be. I just don't see the idea of working a 9-to-5 job anymore, or ever has been any kind of real way, man. There was a time in this country where it was like you could work at a factory and just have a normal, regular life like everybody else would have, but it doesn't work like that anymore. Some things just never change, right? Some things never change. If you live back in this dude's day, right? Back in Cantillon's day, there was a time in which that an individual will get paid to carry a bucket of water from the river to the city. Think about that. Like, people say, someday you're going to have to pay for the water you drink. They've been paying for the water they drink for a while, right? It's not like the water cost anything. The water was free, but to get it to you cost money. So the convenience of having the water put in front of you costs money. And now to think about that concept right there, some dude was paid to go down to the river to scoop up a bucket of water and bring it to you. Think about DoorDash today. It's the same, it's almost the exact same thing. There is no difference. That's service, right? Here's some money, go get me that thing. Right? So that's the economy, right? And now if you can have an economy in which that you work all day and then you go and carry water all day, right? You farm, you plow all day, and then you carry water at night or something of that nature. This is the equivalent of a guy who's working two jobs. Right? That individual might actually someday, way back in the day, be able to acquire enough money that he could lease his own property and he doesn't go and carry water anymore. He plows his own field for his own profit and pays the rent to the owner of the property, and he gets the profit for himself from the abundance of whatever it is that he's farming. See, these are the concepts that don't change. Like, you can see that same type of entrepreneurship that was taking place today, only in a different fashion. What time is it? Hour and 20 into this. Okay. God never changes. People change daily, but their habits are a loop. Hence, history always repeats itself. Yeah, I can see that. Uneducated Economist, a little piece of history. Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam replicated the Bill of Rights and wanted U.S. assistance against the French. He was so disillusioned he studied communism afterwards. Which, again, like, I can't find any system in which that is going, like, the only system that I would agree with to just say, hey man, if you were to pick one, which one would it be? It would be free market capitalism. I want free market capitalism if I was to pick one for myself, right? To be in, like, it was just like, hey, you need to go somewhere, where is it going to be? That would be the one I would go to, right? Every single time, I wouldn't second guess it. Like the Department of Education. Simon, how do you feel about AI taking your order at the drive-thru? I I think what it does is it freed up the person who was taking my order before to go and follow their passions, to pursue the things that they really should have been doing in their life, so that they can actually bring some kind of value to this world that's beyond, would you like fries with that? That's what I think is happening. Like, I am cool with AI, I am cool with automation, I am cool with all these things that bring luxury and conveniences to my life. Like, I am cool with all that stuff. I am not worried about losing my job, right? Even if I was to lose my job, it would free me up to do the things that I really should be doing with my life. It's like probably following the efforts on this channel, right? But that's the way I feel about it. It's just like, I don't think automation and technology and AI and all that other stuff, I don't look at it as a bad thing. I look at it as a very, very beneficial thing. What happens to the economy if Ukraine loses and loans are not paid? I don't know. I think we're going to be running into a liquidity crisis anyway, so that might just happen. So, all right. The West would choke on Russia's terms. Stop eating at the drive-thru. All-Nighter says, incentives run through the world. Free market capitalism allows those incentives to do their job. That's right. Damn right, Larry. Yeah, that's true. All right. You're not getting the laundered money back from Ukraine. I thought you said luxuries is a problem. What would you want more problems? The issue is that smart contracts require a network, internet or otherwise, and that network needs to be governed somehow. I agree. And I think that, again, if you were to allow power companies to profit in their own fashions, they will provide power to the people. All right. So same thing with internet communications, and same thing with anything out there. I'm not saying that government can't have their, I'm not saying like government can't do their part for initiating something, for like creating a particular like in movement towards something. Like say, like even like space, right? Like there's no way in the world that the government is going to be able to do space travel as cheaply and efficiently and as good as the free market could do it themselves. Like I know for a fact that like private sector is going to be able to do space travel way better than the government will ever be able to do. However, it really took the government initiative to make it happen. Like, the private, like you sitting around waiting for the private to do it. Like, come on, private sector, go to space already, right? And you're waiting for it to happen, but it doesn't happen. So if you kickstart it, in a sense, by doing government in, reaction or action, I guess it should be, government action towards that particular movement, you can create it. You can create that concept out there. But the time, the waste, the energy, like, that goes into it, is it really worth it for the investment that goes into that? Knowing that the private sector is going to do it way better. See, like space travel is one of them. Cell phones. Like if government could do anything cheaper, they would be doing it, right? Like cheaper and more efficiently and more profitable. If the government was good at it, they would be doing it. Cell phones are a perfect example of it. Government doesn't do anything with cell phones except for like, surveillance. But the ultimate construction and sell and distribution and all that of cell phones is done by the free market, and there's no way that it's going to get any cheaper than what they can do. Like the government would not have as cheap a cell phone service as what we can buy from the market itself. All right. Silly bird, we live in an enclosed system. There's no way out. All right. Balance sheet goes to zero and debt is moved out of the system, minimal effect. High earners pay all the taxes. The government can only take so much. You believe in space travel like Star Trek? Do I believe in space travel? I don't necessarily believe in space travel, but I believe like in space touring, like going up and like just exiting the Earth's atmosphere and then coming back, like doing a space flight like that, a tour, kind of like the opposite of like going and visiting the Titanic or something. All right. Surveillance. The way you said that struck my truckle. All right. Free markets are in Taiwan because we can't make chips. Government phones. In a financial system, the high earners aren't exactly doing a lot to earn. No, and that's one of the, like, it's so funny because you say like in a high, how did you say that? In a financial system, the high earners aren't exactly doing a lot to earn. And that's true, because in a financial system, the high earners or the high earning times or when interest rates are elevated, and very much like what we are experiencing today. And that return on capital investment is now starting to move back into the economy, which is one of the reasons why the economy is doing much better than what people had ever anticipated was going to when you have high interest rates. But when you have low interest rates, the return on capital investment almost and can go negative when you think about the real return after you had, and after you had put your investment towards a low interest rate. So by the time you gave your capital back, the purchasing power had diminished. But in a high interest rate environment, the return on capital is much higher. You can turn that back into the economy, which again then starts stimulating the economy all on its own. Something that I found interesting is that, like, I'm finding some really good deals on, like, at the grocery store. And it's not on everything, but there's a lot of stuff out there that I've been finding that is just like a lot cheaper. And you can tell that a lot of it is due to over manufacturing. Like one of them is just for a brand name, was the Tillamook ice cream. We were walking past it, and the normal price was like $7.50 or something for this ice cream, like this outrageous price. But it's right now on sale for $2.99, and this is like the second time I've seen this in like the last couple of months, where I feel that they have overproduced on Tillamook ice cream, or at least the idea of buying that higher end ice cream has fallen because people are obviously being more conscious of what it is they're purchasing, and now the bullwhip effect is starting to kick in. When you have an overabundance, what happens to the price? The price begins to come down, and I'm seeing this on a lot of products out there. Now whether or not it's actually going to get into the point where people are going like, oh my gosh, look at this take place. I haven't seen that yet, but signs of it are out there. All right, what do you think of Scandinavian countries using the free market with high taxes, e.g., they give money to people for education and individuals decide how to use it. Same with healthcare companies compete. So, I mean, that's cool. I mean, what's the question? Like, do I find that to be a convenience, or is it going to be lasting? Like, I don't think it'll be ever lasting. I mean, I think that's something that can operate for a while. Having high taxes kind of sucks because you put so much work and effort towards earning money only to have it taken from you. But then you have all these services and convenience that are provided towards you. So, I mean, are you asking if my opinion of that is a good one or bad one? I mean, I don't really have an opinion of it. I mean, I think it's kind of convenient. That's pretty cool. Um, but again, like, is that good or bad? I don't know. Like, that to me is inconsequential to it. Those nations are just as much in the same position as all the rest of the nations that have moved into luxuries. Right? There's no difference in them, and eventually they will fall out too once the new money turns off. And how far out down the road and what that looks like, who knows? Like when that shift happens, when it goes from, the world dollar being, or the United States dollar being the world reserve currency, shifting to some other kind of currency out there, and it's probably going to be somewhere over in the east, as the power shift that's going to take place. It's manufacturing's moving to a particular area, and those areas are going to have a rise in wealth as their manufacturing base begins to raise the standard of living of their people. There's no doubt about it. Right? Now, whether or not these Western nations can continue to pour the new money in with debt issuance and continue to function with their lives the way they do and have the conveniences that they have in their nations and stuff like that will depend on whether or not they can continue to be the debt issuers of the world and continue to sell that debt off and to bring the new money in. At some point, it's going to fail. Like at some point, this all comes to an end. And it doesn't happen in a single day, probably not, but when it does happen, it'll probably happen fairly quickly, like quicker than most people are going to be able to react to it. All right, Dub Big Cat, I have bad news. You are a socialist. You are about much a capitalism as Marx. Uh-oh. Those guys are going at it. All right. Matt, the hand that feeds this nation is working class, not a corporate billionaire capitalist. No, actually, you're wrong. I mean, the people who produce the food in the nation are, but our very way of life is only in existence because the financial system that exists within our nation. Because we have a debt issuance coming from our government that is in high demand around the world, regardless of what anybody says or is trying to prove out there. The U.S. Treasuries are by far the biggest, deepest, safest, most liquid asset in the entire world, and there is nothing else that competes against it. Because of that, it gives us a very unique position in which that we can now borrow money from the entire world because they're willing to lend it to us. We then use that money to buy up their productions, their hard work, their commodities, and everything that they got going on so that we can have a higher standard of living. And that's really what this nation is built on. I mean, it used to be a very, how do I say it, like a very patriotic thing, right? like hardworking American producing here in this nation. Like that was a very like, it's a very like hardworking American feel. Yeah. And I totally get that. Like I mean, I know I've built houses in this country. I work in a lumber yard. I've seen guys, work in the lumber trade. This is it. This is like the heart of it, right? But it doesn't exist like that. Not like it did. I wish it did. I mean, it would be awesome if we were producers and savers and creating wonderful things for the rest of the world to buy from us. I would think that that would be just an amazing thing. It would be so awesome. But it doesn't. It's not like that anymore. And really, it switched back in like, well, it started switching a long time ago, but really it happened in the early 70s. We had there was a time there. It was like, okay, so Nixon was put into a position, and I doubt he had any decision making on any of this stuff. It was more like, hey, man, you got to go out there and tell these people this, right? I think that's really how it went down. But ultimately, it was down to this. It was like, okay, so the move into luxuries has created a situation in which the domestic manufacturers are leaving, and they are going to start sending the gold out of the nation because the foreign production is now becoming more prevalent. Right? And it's only a matter of time before all the gold is gone. And they knew this. They knew this because it's explained right here. Right? So now, what do? Right? There's nothing you can do. There's really nothing you can do. The people have moved into luxuries. The foreign production is pouring in. Gold standard is the only thing that we have. So what are we going to do? We're going to end up suffering in misery and poverty if we don't do something about this. And they said, okay, sever the gold standard. People were pissed. They lost faith with the United States, so much so that the United States was having a hard time selling their debt. Like, people were like, dude, you're done. Get the hell out of here, right? We don't trust you anymore. And the United States was trying to sell off U.S. treasuries and paying them back in German marks and Swiss francs. This was a bad time. This was like, the 70s were a horrible time for the United States trying to figure out what it is that they were going to do. Volcker being the, ultimate hero of the economy, whatever that, like, I mean, I don't think he was the decision maker on this. I think this was planned out with the FOMC along with a lot of other smart people within the banking industry. They raised them interest rates up to 15%. And people were like, well, hell, the dollar's already the world reserve currency, and they're paying 15% on this debt. Okay. Well established. Here it comes. Right? Severing of the gold supply. Severing of the gold standard. Right? You weren't going to get it. We're going into a fiat currency, and from this point on, we don't need to produce anything. We don't need to produce a single thing anymore. All we have to do is just issue out this debt, and we can buy the production of the world. No wonder why we have the standard of living we do. I mean, people think that we're like some kind of unique people here that have some sort of like, position that is only exclusive to us. Yeah, they're right. It's because of that debt issuance. It's not going to last. It's not going to last forever anyway. I mean, could it last my lifetime? Possibly. I mean, I'm sure they could figure out a way, but is it going to last for my kids or maybe their kids or something? I doubt it. But then again, if you had asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if the dollar would still be in existence today, I would have said no. So, have to change the way we look at things. All right, Django, thank you so much. The Django Geek. All right, thank you for the $5. The part of Cantillon effect where manufacturers leave is so-called the Dutch disease. Yep, that's right. And there's all kinds of names for it, but just understanding, like, just what it is. Now, I should go and look up the Dutch disease so I can see the actual definition of it, but, it's ultimately the same thing, is that once the manufacturing of a foreign nation starts to become cheaper than what you can produce yourself, they're going to leave. It's just the way it is. If you can find, like, think about it. We were covering it in a video talking about, like, I believe it was the French farmers. And in the article, like, I didn't even really read through the article that much. I mean, these French farmers are just pissed at the politics, at the politicians, and they're just like, rioting and protesting and doing all kinds of stuff. And I remember reading within the article, like they're interviewing just some lady at like a grocery store, and she says, yes, I can see that the imported meat is cheaper, but I'm buying the French made meat, or the French production to keep my money local. Like she has to make a conscious decision to do it, knowing that the domestic manufacturing is going to be more expensive. Seeing the imported meat there cheaper, saying, nah, I ain't touching that stuff, right? Now, that's the type of conscious decision that people would have to make generally, like all the time, in order for the concepts of the Cantillon effect to not take place. Most people are going to be like, I can buy two of those as opposed to one of these. I'm going to get two, right? And that's just the way it is. Right? And so, like, understanding that, just understanding that point of view alone can then, like, say, okay, we can add politics to it to try and change that by doing, tariffs and subsidies or whatever it is that we need to do. But you're going to have to know that you're always going to have those political forces at hand, taxes, power, economic regulations, the all the force that you don't want in your life would have to exist in order to keep it from shifting away. Right? Simon says, just get it. That's what I'm saying. Just get it already. Anyone else at work getting paid? Yeah, that isn't that cool. All right, Deja Vu. That's so funny. If we all just bought from Facebook Marketplace, would that fix the economy? Would that fix the economy? No, because you know what would end up happening is that if everybody went to Facebook Marketplace, where they were buying all the things that have already been purchased in the world and they were used and now being sold on Marketplace, all the new items that weren't being sold in the stores because people were buying stuff off of Facebook Marketplace would then find their way onto Facebook Marketplace, where they would then being sold instead of being sold on the store. So eventually the new products would find their way in. You have to make a conscious decision to say, I am not going to buy anything new. It's not just the Facebook Marketplace. That's a great place to go to create the incentive to buy used stuff or previously purchased stuff, and not to have that move into luxuries. I can see where that would be a great facilitator of it, but it's the conscious decision to not buy new or move into luxuries that is the overall idea. Okay, let's see. Cruise down here. Lumberjack says, Crick broke the cat's argument again. You guys are going at it still. All right, I'll move on here. Separation of church and state just means one religion can't rule all. See the Middle East, non-members, and second-class citizens. I like the haircut. Thank you. Yeah, I do too. Is inflation just another name for price gouging? No. Price gouging is when all of a sudden there's a huge storm in Clatsop County and trees fall all over Highway 30 and Highway 26 and Highway 101, and the bridge gets shut down and we're completely isolated, and the gas station owner jacks the price a gallon up to $8 a gallon. That's price gouging. Okay? Simply explained. Inflation happens when the increase of consumption starts to offset supply and demand. That's it, right? It's supply demand imbalances, however that is created. Now, when you have a supply issue because a storm in Clatsop County has knocked off all the transportation distribution coming in, and you have a limited supply of gas, and you have a price that's being willing to be paid, right? It's supply demand imbalances. Now that is price gouging, right? But inflation comes from an increase in consumption. More people have more money to spend within the economy. That more spending in the economy then starts to create the imbalances within supply and demand, and then the prices move up. Right? That's it. That's the difference within this whole idea, because a lot of times, see, people are saying it's price gouging, and I'm like, it can't be price gouging. I work retail, I know, right? See, if it was price gouging, then what would have to happen is, because I sell lumber, right? Is I would have to go to all the other lumber yards in my area and say, hey guys, listen, we're going to do something here. We're going to take our price of our lumber and we're going to move it up. We're going to move it up 20%. Right? We're all going to take a 20% increase on all our lumber, and we're going to price gouge the hell out of this stuff because nobody's going to have any other choice because we're the only ones selling lumber. We're all going to work together on this. Sounds good? Okay. And so everybody would be like, okay, yeah, we can all make money out of this. They don't have any other choice. They have to shop with me. And if we increase our lumber by 20%, then we'll just make that much more money and we'll price gouge the hell out of these guys. Yeah, let's do it. Sounds great. I'd be like, okay, guys, tomorrow we do this, right? We start tomorrow. Prices go up tomorrow and that's it, right? And the next day, everybody opens up, they increase their prices, and I happen to be the one dude who priced it just slightly less than they did. Because you know what? That's what I would do, right? Because I'm going to sell lumber, and I'm going to sell as much as I can. And if I can price mine competitively to the point that I sell better than they can, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so even though we made this promise with each other that we were going to mark it up 20%, I'm going to mark mine up 15, maybe 18. All right? And this is what's going to end up happening. Those guys are going to recognize that. They're going to like, hey, screw you, bro. And they're going to mark their stuff down. And then I'm going to mark my stuff down. And then they're going to mark their stuff down until eventually we get to the point that I'm not going to mark my stuff down any further than this. That. I'm at my bottom. That's it. And that's what's going to happen every time. Right? People don't seem to think that there's competition out there. There is fierce competition for your money. I mean, do you just throw your money away willy-nilly? You just go down there and go like, oh, 2x4s are $15. Here, let me open up my wallet. There you go. Price gouging bastards. Of course not. You're going to be like, man, I'm going someplace else. Screw you. Right? Just like everybody else would. And they're going to go find the cheapest deal they can. And if I can offer it up just slightly less than anybody else can, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. Because I want to make the sale. Right? I don't want to price gouge people. I want to make the sale. I want to make the sale at a profitable, at a decent margin that is competitive and acceptable. Right? I don't want to rip people off. That is not my intention. Like, I know as a salesman, I've been doing sales my entire life. That is not what I want to do. That's the last thing I want to do is rip somebody off. I want to give them a product that they need at a fair price that is both, good for them and good for me. And price gouging it might work for a second, but it fails. It'll fail you in the long run. What happened when the Saudis say they won't take any more USD for their oil? Well, what are they going to take? Good luck. What are you going to take? You're going to sit there and take rupees all day? You're going to take yuan? Now you're going to be shopping with India and China, and that's it. Maybe you can get everything you need from India and China. We're not going to accept it. The United States isn't. So if you want any of our grain, you want any of our soy, you want any of our agricultural products, you want any of our defenses, you want any of our stuff, right? Some of the services we provide are protection of shipping grounds. You want any of that stuff, well, that's all in US dollars. So go ahead, accept whatever you want. But it ain't going to work out too well. And it never has. And the main reason is that there's just simply nothing else out there that can do it. Right? Like, yeah, you can have... You can say we're going to do it in rupees. We're going to do it in rubles. We're going to do it in yuan. Right? You can say you can do it in anything. But there's a couple of things that those particular currencies have to do. They have... First of all, most world transactions, although might be denominated in those particular currencies, they're not actually using those currencies. They're using assets that are denominated in those currencies. And like when it comes to the US dollar, it's mainly the US treasuries. So the treasuries are what's actually facilitating the trade of world trade, not the dollar, but the treasuries themselves. See, the dollar actually costs money to use. You got to store it, transfer it, there's transferring fees. The U.S. Treasury actually pays a little bit of an interest to it. So although that it's small, at least you're not taking a loss by using it. So Treasuries ends up being the preferred method of doing world transactions, along with other contracts out there as well that are denominated in dollars. Right? And that's the important thing to remember when it comes to like the world currency and whether or not the Saudis are going to do world transactions in oils or not, is there a safe and liquid asset that is available for them to do the transactions with to begin with? Like, there's not enough yuan denominated debt to facilitate the transactions. Like, even if they wanted to do it, they just isn't there. Much like there wasn't enough gold to do the transactions and dollars facilitated the trade, and then they realized there was far too many dollars. Without the dollars, there wouldn't have been that many transactions because there's a limited amount of gold. Same thing with the Saudis and the oil trade. Yeah, we want to do it in a different currency, but there's not enough of that currency to do it with. How do you get enough of that currency to do it with? Well, you have to ask that nation to go extremely deep into debt by issuing the safe and liquid asset of the something similar to what that would be of the U.S. Treasury. There's no nation doing that. They just don't, there's no nation even doing it. Like, so like, yeah, we want to do it. We're going to take over. You're going to fail. Okay. Go for it. Like, where is it? Show it to me. Where's that damn safe and liquid asset? Right? And then show me the nation that's going to be willing to go into as much deficit trade, meaning that they are going to import a hell of a lot more than they export, as much as the United States is willing to do. No nation wants to do that. All nation wants to be producers. They want to produce something and sell it. They don't want to produce debt and then have to make a debt payment. Right? They want to produce something, get some money, and then buy it. Right? Just like any nation, being producers and savers. The United States is the only one who wants to be a debtor. And there's no other nation that comes close to competing to what the United States does. So, yeah, at some point it will fail. At some point they can switch to whatever, like Saudis say, I'm not going to do deals in dollars anymore. Then they're not going to do deals, are you? You know, you're going to do deals with a couple of nations out there and you're going to be out the game because nobody else is going to be doing deals with you if you're not doing deals in dollars. Because there's just simply no currency out there to do it with, or not enough of it. Not at the level that what the United States has. All right. Any political ideology works when people but people first. But as Bible states, love money is the root of all evil. I don't think it's the love of money. I think it's the love of luxuries. Like, there's nothing wrong with earning money. There's nothing wrong with earning a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with taking money and earning and being investing and doing all the other stuff. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying your money. There's nothing wrong with any of it, including the move into luxuries. It's the understanding that what is happening is this transition, this cycle of earning money, being producers and savers, getting into the luxuries, and eventually falling into collapse. It's a cyclical thing that's taking place. Like, why you try to, like, how you stop the tides, how you stop the sun from setting. Like, those are things you don't try to do. You just live with the fact that it happens, you know. All right. There's no such thing as other people's money. The goal of money isn't to need a bunch of it. Yui, where do you get your economic news from? That's a really good question, Larry. I don't get my economic news from any direct source from any one area. I do a lot of research online through Google searches. A lot of times it has to do with maybe like something within the narrative. Like, for example, like I might put, like, okay, say for example, 6 months ago, I wanted to talk about the dot plot. So I already have my understandings and knowledge and beliefs and know about the dot plot, right? I mean, I've studied it enough that I just know what that is, right? And so to me, it wasn't like, oh, what does the Fed just say? You know, like I looked at that information and I just took it with a grain of salt, like I did, you know. But other people were taking a huge interest in this, right? So I read through a lot of articles, so I just put in, like, you know, say dot plot. and I will just research whatever. I don't care what source it comes from. To me, it doesn't really matter what source it comes from because I'm not looking for necessarily the information. I already have that. What I want is the understanding of what other people are looking at for the information because maybe they have something that I didn't see. So I was just like, oh, okay, wait, that's a different idea. Like I enhance my concepts of what it is that's going on. Or, these people are absolutely delusional. They have no idea what they're talking about, right? However, what I'm getting out of that is the kind of the basic idea of what it is that the market or the economy is feeling about a particular direction within it. Okay? So this is how I do a lot of my research is that I don't necessarily look for news that's coming out. I'm not I'm not really like on the edge of like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like I already kind of have my understanding of what's happening. What I'm looking out there is either confirmation to my understanding or maybe, a change to my point of view. But again, like when it comes to things like where the Federal Reserve is going to go with their interest rates, I'm not looking for news on that. Like I do not look for news that says when this is going to happen. What I'm looking at is the Federal Reserve speeches talking about neutral interest rates like R star and how it is that they are going to adjust or looking at their Fed policies in accordance to the neutral interest rate. To me, that's not something that you're going to get a lot of information out of the news from, no matter how you go and source it. I don't care if you're looking at Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, or anything else like that. You're going to have to go start diving into economic research. You're going to have to go into like, maybe even like, institutional educational systems or something like that to find where this information might have actually been studied to the point that you can actually get some knowledge from it. Otherwise, what you are doing is you're getting somebody's opinion on the matter. And that's ultimately 99% of the mainstream media is an opinion. I learned this not I mean everybody's always had this kind of belief that it's like propaganda, right? But I never found it as prevalent as I did when I was in calling out the lumber when I'm sitting here giving lumber market video updates, and I'm watching people getting 200,000 a million views from their lumber reports, and it is wrong, like absolutely incorrect information, doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, is not accurate to the situation that has taken place. And I realize they're getting this information from the mainstream media. And that's the reason why they are saying it the way that they are. They don't have any kind of real understanding of what's going on within the markets. And this is like bad information being regurgitated over and over again. And so when I realized this, I'm like, crap. There is zero information that you can get from the mainstream media. None. Like all of it, 100% of it is propagandized. So in order to truly understand the information, you have to live it for yourself. So meaning like if you want to know the car market, you better be a car dealer or a car manufacturer or something of that nature. You better be in the game or reading the documents and listening to the CEOs of their meetings and being in that business away from the mainstream media concepts of it. And that's the only way you're truly going to understand it because everything within the mainstream media is propagandized, including especially the monetary policy coming from the Federal Reserve. So getting my information, I try to get as much of it as I can directly from the Federal Reserve itself. Right, because that's the only place that I can think of that is actually going to be telling of the true monetary policy. Everything that I find within the mainstream media is propagandized to guide the market's view. I believe something is true. I won't give others the option to choose lies. Yes, love luxuries. All right, there's something wrong paying more than worth. All right, do you listen to Clear Value Tax? He's pretty good and honest about economics also. No, but I probably should. All right. Is BRICS going to be a real threat to the USD anytime soon? The BRICS nations? I don't think so. I don't think the BRICS nations are going to be a real threat to any nation just from the things that I said. Like, what is it that they're going to do? Are they going to use their own currency? Okay, well, Russia and India tried doing that out for a while. Russia ended up with a bunch of rupees that they didn't really want. That ended up being a pain for them because nobody else in the world wants rupees except for India. So India's just like, oh, so you need a place to go with the rupees? Well, what do you want? We'll manufacture it for you. And so Russia's just like, so what? I got to be your, I got to send money back to you to manufacture the things that I want. I just can't go over to these people and buy it. Why not? It's because they don't want rupees. Right? Even if it's another BRICS nations, they may not want it. Right? Or what Russia needs to do is sell those rupees off for another currency that somebody does want. And by selling off those rupees, what you are doing is devaluing the rupees themselves, making the value of them less, and therefore not able to have as much purchasing power with your money. This doesn't work out too well for these nations. Like the BRICS nations and their ideas, I think are going to continue. Right? They are going to continue to try and establish these partnerships. They're going to bring in ever increasing amount of people. They're going to try and set up their own currencies. They're going to try and do all these things. I totally believe it, and I don't have any doubt in my mind that it is going to happen. Right? However, the amount that they would have to do in order to compete against what the dollar is doing is so astronomical that in order for it to come to fruition, it's going to take some serious changes that are going to occur within the economy, and there's probably going to have to be a collapse of the dollar. And the reason is because of Gresham's law. Now, if you understand Gresham's law, you're going to understand that two currencies can't exist at the same time, one being good and one being bad. If there's two currencies in existence, one being good and one being bad, the good one will get chased out by the bad one. So if the BRICS nations come in and say, hey, we're going to start doing deals in gold, because that way everybody will want to do deals with us if we just deal in gold. Well, guess what? If you have deals in gold and you have deals in dollars, right? If you came to me and you said, hey, I want to buy something from you, and I said, okay, what do you got for money? And they said, I got dollars and I got gold. And I said, okay, I'll take either one. Which one are you going to give me? You're going to give me your gold or you're going to give me the dollars? You're going to give me the dollars, right? And the gold is going to end up getting hoarded away. The dollars ends up gets put into circulation. See, this is again, like the BRICS nations won't be able to compete. They can't, Gresham's law will prevent it from taking place, right? Now, granted, at some point, it will fail and then a new currency can come in and take over. But until then, I'm not concerned. Like my level of concern is really, really low. Is it taking place? Absolutely. Is it going to grow? Absolutely, right? Is it going to grow to the point that it can knock dollar off its pedestal? I doubt it. Not anytime soon, and if it does, it's going to come with a major collapse of the dollar. Just saying that. What time? Okay, I got like, how many hours? I got 2 hours into this and just a few minutes left on my phone. I think I'm going to call it quits here, guys. 2 hours is long enough. YouTube algorithm hates these long videos anyway. Deja vu. Once you have a majority believing it, it can and will be monetized regardless. Yep. So, and that's just it. Like, if there was one thing that I really encourage people to go and look at, it is the flexible average inflation targeting over time, man. I mean, because that to me is the biggest propagandized news that is being spread across the whole markets right now, that literally 99.9% of the people have got it wrong. They like, and it's not even me trying to be like, oh man, I got this information that nobody else has, and they're just like, it's not that at all. Like, I mean, it literally is the Federal Reserve from reading their own documents saying this. Like, we are not going for a 2% target. It's appropriate monetary policy is to seek inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. Like, how it is that people don't feel that the Federal Reserve is conducting themselves exactly the way that they want it is beyond me. But yet everybody seems to think that they've got it wrong, or they're failing, or they're not doing it right. Okay, I mean, maybe by their opinion on it, but by the Fed's opinion, they're nailing it. So. All right. Will there be lots of bankruptcies in the future? I think there will be. I think over the course of the second half of the year, I think is going to be pretty heavy as far as like a lot of failures, bankruptcies, liquidity issues, stuff like that. And mainly because, the Treasury is almost admitting it, and so is the Federal Reserve. I mean, the two of these guys together are going to be conducting changes to the way that they are functioning right now in order to provide liquidity to the markets. Mainly, the Treasury is going to be buying back its own bonds, and the Federal Reserve is going to be backing off on the unwinding of the balance sheet, meaning that they are not going to allow as many treasuries to roll off. They're going to hold on to a lot more. So both of those are going to be providing more liquidity to the market. All right. You guys are awesome. Thank you all for being here. We got 188 people watching with 189 likes. I love seeing that. We got $29.98 in super chats because you guys are always so very generous with those super chats. And the power of my phone just went to 5%, so we're going to call it quits right there. Uneducated Economist, you let me know. See my phone, there we go.